Welcome everyone. It's 6:03 on Monday night. You're listening to the 94th installment of the Age Out Angels Radio Hour on www.hamiltonradio.net Channel 2. I'm your host, Greg Rapport. I'm the founder and executive director of Age Out Angels. We're a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. Age Out Angels provides one-to-one mentors to vulnerable youth for the purposes of coordinating the care and services that they need to survive. We try to help young people avoid some of the horrible pitfalls that they're likely to face if they don't have a proper safety net. And this program is brought to you every week at the same time, courtesy of Doc G, William Saunders, Ruben Rodriguez, and all the fine people here at Hamilton Radio who allow us to use this airtime. Ruben is on the big board tonight. Robin is back there producing, so good to have both of you with us here in the studio. And thank you so much at home for tuning in, because we've put together what I hope you will find to be an insightful and compelling view of the child welfare system and related issues that improve our community. So get ready, because tonight on the Radio Hour, Gregory PAULSON, Executive Director of the Trenton Health Team, will be here to discuss a fabulous report that his company put out called the Trenton Community Health Needs and Assets Assessment. And we're going to put a special little focus on adverse childhood experiences a little bit later in the show. And you're going to hear a lot more about that in weeks and months to come. Also with me in the studio is Sherry Rubel. Sherry's a photographer and a homeless advocate, and her idea for housing the homeless is positively ingenious. So stay with us for the full hour tonight, and I promise you'll walk away just a little richer for having done so. And stay with Hamilton Radio all night long for a combination of great music and great talk. After me, it's going to be all music tonight. But I want to call your attention to a show that's going to be on Hamilton Radio on Friday. It's called The Monk Show. And this particular edition of The Monk Show will be addressing police brutality and, as Mr. Monk puts it, how to avoid being killed or harassed by a disgruntled police officer. That should be a very interesting show. So tune into The Monk Show on Friday. That's Friday, August 16th at 10 p.m. right here at www.hamiltonradio.net Channel 2. Now, if you would be so kind, take a moment, open a separate browser, and find us on Facebook if you're listening on Hamilton Radio. Go to my name, Greg Rapport, and please hit that share button. Or even better, email your whole address book and tell everyone to go to hamiltonradio.net Channel 2. Please tell everyone in your world what we're talking about tonight, because what you're going to hear applies to every geographic region, including where you live. And what we talk about here needs to be shared. Don't keep this private to yourself. Help us. We need you to help us share this. Tell your friends. You understand there's a generation of youth out there being completely forgotten and neglected. And caring people like you and me, and like the people in my studio tonight, can't sit still while that happens. So while you're taking a moment to get us up on Facebook and share this, let me remind you that we're here almost every Monday from 6 to 7 p.m. with the Age Out Angels Radio Hour. Next week, August 19th, I believe I will have 3 generations of people in the studio with me. Michelle Tompkins from Mill Hill will be back next week, and she'll be here with 2 high school students who just completed their Next Generation Youth Leaders program. Also next week, Ariel Payne, a Foster alumni, will be on the phone to talk about her progress since transitioning out of foster care. And that's not all. Kevin B. Tyler will be here from an organization called Visitation, Inc. So the list just goes on and on and on and on. And be sure to tune in every Monday at 6 p.m. for what we consider to be our unfiltered look at the child welfare system and other related community services. This is where you come to get the whole truth, and I promise what you'll hear tonight cannot be found on the nightly news. And since we're live, you can be part of the show. You can write into us during the show in the comments field on Facebook. Or call in if you want to join in the conversation. Be a part of the show. The call-in number is 609-807-2492. Again, 609-807-2492. And you can feel free to call in anonymously. You don't have to use your name if there's something you want to talk about, but maybe it's a little bit sensitive. You're worried about repercussions. Don't worry at all. Just call in and say, I don't want to say my name, but I want to say my piece. We'd be happy to hear from you. Hey, Peg Gold, the assistant director at the Community Education and Training at the Mercer County Community College, is a friend of the show, and she sent me a note after the show last week, because this is an area that we talked about last week. She's very sensitive to the need for non-English speakers to learn enough English to function better in society, and certainly to expand their employment possibilities. And, we were talking last week about the fact that more and more families in Trenton don't speak English in their home. That's not their home language. And while that's cool and the kids can grow up learning two languages, on the other hand, those same children tend to be at a disadvantage compared to children who grow up in homes where English is the primary spoken language. So that was the discussion from last week if you missed it. And Peg told me that her program at Mercer County Community College offers English as a second language free and non-credit. There are morning, afternoon, evening, and even a Saturday morning class. And my thought at that time was I wondered if enough of the people who need to know about that class, a free class, can actually find out about it. Do they have a way to learn about that? My guess is that not a whole lot of the people who don't speak English as their primary language are listening to this program. But the point is that there are programs here to help with almost anything that you can think of that you need. The question is, do they reach the people who need to know that they're out there? And then the further question, if they were properly utilized, if they actually did reach their target audiences, would there be nearly enough resources to handle the demand? So Peg wrote a follow-up to me because that's the sign-up day for her class just happened to be the same day as last week's radio hour. And she wrote to me, in the first day of ESL registration, there were over 117 people who signed up, and she expects to fill all 250 available seats. So in order to put that in perspective, we kind of need to find out what the total demand might actually be for that, and I'll see if I can get that information to you by next week. Now, as soon as we remove a child from their birth families, we alter their identity. Who we are as children is so highly connected to our relationship with our birth parents, and there's really no way to avoid this. In the foster care system, in subtle ways, we suggest that maybe the birth family is bad and the foster adoptive family is good. The child is encouraged to identify with the foster adoptive family and not the biological family. But if we listen to our children, we realize that this simply does not work. No child can or should ignore their origins. They are an intrinsic part of who they are. That bag they came with, full of smelly clothes and crumpled photos and maybe a dirty teddy bear, is not the trash that we think it is. It is who they are. When we mindlessly throw it away, we throw a part of the child away as well. We may feel that we're doing them a service, but in fact, we're creating a situation whereby they may never, ever feel whole. Unaddressed, this lack of wholeness leads to a whole range of problems later in life. They may seek other people to complete them or look to addictions to fill the gaps. They're likely to say they don't know who they are and don't like the parts that they do know. As foster and adoptive parents and professionals, we must remember to honor every part of our children. Even the attributes that we may struggle with are testament to the struggles that they've had. And those struggles are, and always will be, a part of their stories and a part of who they are. Finally, before we get to our guests, I need to thank Eileen Jensen and all the people at the Family Support Organization for their efforts. We were fortunate to attend their annual resource fair. It was really wonderful, and it was yet another example of how important it is to have little pockets of nonprofits getting together on display, because it's the only real way for consumers to know what services are available. Nonprofits, as a rule, don't take money from donors and use them to buy billboards to advertise what they do. So it's a real quest to get your name out to the right target audience. And the part that I find interesting is that each organization that stages a resource fair has a slightly different target audience from the previous one. For example, I know one group that works with homeless youth. One group focuses on special needs youth. One group focuses on teachers and guidance counselors, and on and on and on. There's a million different groups and a million different nonprofits, and it reflects the fragmentation of nonprofit organizations that offer social service programs. The result of this is I see a lot of the same nonprofits exhibiting at all these different places because, we offer services that cross target groups. So what we need are more and more organizations cooperating to combine their resource fairs, pool their resources, get the word out for a larger scale event so that the event becomes less private and more public. We met a very interesting group at the Family Support Organization that are trying something that's never been done before. And to hear the rest of that story, you got to stick around for the end of the show tonight because I'm going to tell you all about them in my final words. Hey, I'd love to hear from you. Remember, if you want to call in, you can call in anonymously to 609-807-2492. We're going to take a short break. You can also write any opinions you have into the comments field on my Facebook page. Hit that share button on Facebook. Stay right where you are. We'll be back in 1 minute with Gregory Paulson and Sherry Rubel. Don't go away. And we are back. Thanks for sticking around. I hope you hit that share button on Facebook. To my right, if you're looking on the Facebook page, is Gregory Paulson. He's the Executive Director of the Trenton Health Team. Gregory, welcome.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be here.
And it's Greg, right? So
Greg's fine, sure.
So we're two Gregs.
There you go, two Gregs across the table here.
Okay. So since this is radio, don't worry. No one will be confused.
That's all right. Just ask for Greg. One of us will answer.
But you're the Executive Director of the Trenton Health Team, and you're here mainly to talk about this incredible report that your team put out called the Community Health Needs and Asset Assessment. It's 136 pages.
Light reading.
Of information. And but I think the interesting thing about tonight's show is that my two guests couldn't be more different. And so I believe they're going to leave the studio as great friends. But on Greg's side, we're going to be looking at data and stats, right? And numbers and metrics. That's what we're going to be looking at. Well, Sherry Rubel is sitting to my left, and Sherry has been an artist all of her life. And welcome to the show, Sherry.
Thank you very much, Greg.
Some of you may remember Sherry was actually on the show about 2 months ago, and something weird happened with the sound. Like we were in the new studio, and why one wire crosses over another.
Right.
And there was hum on the line the whole time, so I don't think anyone got to hear what she had to say. And your idea for housing the homeless is just mind-boggling, and we're just going to tease them with that for the moment until we get to it.
Sounds good.
But let's talk a little bit about you. You are a photographer.
Yes, I am.
Okay, and we're not talking about the person who takes pictures in Walmart. We're talking about an actual artistic photographer.
I try to be, yes.
But your subject matter is primarily homeless people.
Well, it was at that particular time when I was documenting in Tent City, yes, in Lakewood, New Jersey.
So what made you go in that direction? What made you say, I'm going to take this photography art that I do and just apply it in that area?
I was looking for a photographic project that had some depth and purpose, and I did a Google search, and I decided to Google homelessness, and I joke about it and say never in a million years did I think that a Google search would change my life, because it most definitely did. I Googled homelessness, and I discovered Tent City in Lakewood, New Jersey.
And what was it about Tent City that captured your imagination?
I thought it would be something that needed to be brought out to our attention.
Another one of those items that's just not on the nightly news.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So it actually touched you.
Yes, it did.
Was there a specific spark? Do you remember like a moment?
Or
was it a accumulation of?
When I first initially went down there, I really didn't think it was a project that I was going to follow through with. And I was working with Patch.com at the time, an online paper, and my regional editor had seen me post some photographs, and he became intrigued with what I was doing, and so he became involved in the project with me along with a filmmaker. So it was the three of us working together over about 4 years, trying to write and bring homelessness into light.
And you had that reinforcement of,
Right.
of the people around you. All right, so I mean, there's an obvious question that comes to mind. You go down to Tent City, right? And I'm sure 90% of our listeners don't know what Tent City is specifically, but you can get an imagination in your head of what a tent city of homeless people might look like, right?
You know, in Lakewood, the tent city that was in Lakewood was not your typical homeless encampment, tent city homeless encampment. So I don't know that I agree with you.
Maybe
with
that's
that
not true.
phrase.
Yeah, they actually take on different.
Yes, they do. And most
Different-
people will look at a homeless encampment, a tent city, as something that they see on the side of the road, under a bridge, or, you know, in a field somewhere to the side of a road. Tent City in Lakewood was an actual encampment that became a community of people that were functioning as a community and surviving quite nicely off of volunteerism and charitable donations.
How about that? All right, so what it makes me wonder, though, is when you go into a situation like that where there are multiple people, what, maybe 50, 100?
I think at its max it had about 110 people.
Okay, so 110 people are in that situation. One would think you would encounter all of the mental health issues that aren't being addressed.
Absolutely.
And so does that make it less friendly?
It was definitely an interesting situation, but everybody is certainly, regardless of their personal situation, entitled to have a roof over their head, I believe. So regardless of whether or not you were dealing with somebody who was an alcoholic or somebody who might have, you know, been in prison and trying to reenter society from a negative past, certainly does not mean that that person should not have
A roof over
over their head.
Yeah.
Sherry, if I may ask a question too, because I think this is such an important issue and one that certainly affects the Trenton community quite a bit. I think one of the misperceptions is that there are often people who are near homeless who, because just of life circumstances, kind of had that last thing happen that pushed them into homelessness. I wonder if some, and I apologize, I've not seen your work, but how many people had just a more kind of a routine story or close to routine story that ended up having them in the situation of homelessness?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Greg. And there were several, more so than people actually realize. There were people who were living in Tent City that were working 2 full-time jobs. And they were still just not able to put a roof over their heads. The cost of living in the state of New Jersey, as well as other places, is just phenomenal.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a support system and you don't have any assistance and people to fall back on to help you in any way, shape, or form, you know, many people are, as they say, one paycheck away from homelessness.
Yeah.
And it can actually happen to any one of us at any time.
Indeed.
Greg, certainly a component in the equation of,
Absolutely.
of the lives of people in the urban area is healthcare and access to healthcare and all that. Where does Trenton Health Team fit into that equation?
Sure. So the organization started back in 2006 initially, and for those who've been around the Trenton community, that was around the time that Capitol Health announced plans to close Mercer Medical Center to build Capitol Health Hopewell. And we came out of a way that the community would respond to that healthcare crisis. So we were formed by the 2 hospitals in Trenton, Capitol Health and St. Francis Medical Center, the Federally Qualified Health Center, Henry J. Austin, and the city's Department of Health. We've grown since then. We were actually incorporated as a 501c3 in 2010. Today we've got a staff of 30, all working on the health and well-being of the greater Trenton community. So we're an organization that connects healthcare entities together, but notice I said health and well-being. So we work with more than 100 social service, faith-based, and community organizations, helping them all connect together to really elevate and support the health and well-being of the Trenton community.
So do you offer specific services yourself, or is it a coordination of services where you refer people into other situations?
It's really all of the above. So we have some direct programs that we offer. We run the New Jersey SEED program. That's CEED. It's Cancer Education and Early Detection. So we actually provide cancer screening and diagnosis and early treatment services for people without insurance. We provide some case management services for people who are trying to navigate the system and are running into a lot of barriers, and a few other direct programs around, things like healthy eating and physical activity. And we like to refer to those as kind of downstream interventions. They're the things that are kind of meeting urgent need, all the way up to we do policy work. We work on kind of changing the way organizations work together. You mentioned this piece of there are lots of different organizations that provide services that don't come together. We do exactly that. We try to have organizations come together so that people who are organizations working on similar things know about each other, align their efforts together, and we try to reduce duplication such that all of the resources of each organization can be used effectively.
So is the organization sort of structured by categories of treatment type, like a cancer treatment, diabetes?
Somewhat. So
how is it structured?
We organize our work somewhat that way. We have teams who work more on the kind of clinical healthcare side, and some of our staff who work more out in the community. But we found that people don't experience just one disease at a time or one thing at a time. Healthcare is the one who kind of says, "I'm working on diabetes today," or "I'm working on cancer today." We work very hard to meet members of the community where they are, talk to them about their needs, which often are social service related or social needs first and healthcare needs second. People tend to work on having a roof over their head, having food on the table, being able to take care of their family member, children, grandchildren. That's what's first. And if we need them to work on their health outcomes or things that healthcare care a lot about, we first need to figure out what are the other things that each individual is working on and how can we support those as well.
All right, so what do I do? Walk into your office, call you on the phone? How does our initial?
We're all over the place. Some days, although we try to keep our food healthy, we do have some cookies sneak in once in a while. First thing to do for those listening, especially, follow us on social media at Trenton Health on Facebook, Instagram, TrentonHealthTeam.org. I think you might be surprised at the breadth of work. So you'll see, for example, this past Saturday, we were out on Brunswick Avenue in Trenton with one of our national grant programs working on street safety and beautification of Brunswick Avenue right next to Martin Luther King School. So there's a ton that we do. Speaking of artists, we work with a local graffiti artist, Leon Rainbow, who's tremendous, who did some original artwork for that. We were supported by a national nonprofit named Street Plans that really guided that work with us. So there's a tremendous amount going on in Trenton, and that's what I think it's fun to highlight in conversations like this. There's some assumptions about the community, and then there's a lot that people don't know.
A whole lot that people don't know. That's right. In fact, I've often said to people in New Jersey that no matter where you live, and this is probably true for the whole country, no matter where you live, you're never more than 10 or 12 miles away from 800 homeless teenagers. Well, in Texas, you're probably never more than 800 miles away from 800 homeless teenagers. But what the point is here. Wherever you happen to be enjoying that incredible brunch at the nice place with the tablecloths, you're 10 miles away from 800 homeless kids. Do you find that there's a bit of a stigma among people in the urban area to even seek health care?
I don't think that stigma is restricted just to urban areas. I think there's a lot of stigma around receiving services, particularly when we get into behavioral health services, social services. I don't think it's easy for people to ask for help, especially when the need that they have carries a kind of a social identity with it. So absolutely. We've worked with more than 70 faith-based organizations in Trenton, because we need to find the areas where people go for support when they're in need, and certainly communities of faith are a great place. So if we work with a pastor and the pastor talks about services or ways to get help, or says, listen, maybe I personally am struggling with diabetes, or I'm struggling with this, when you start to share and destigmatize some of these health or behavioral health issues, that helps people know that they can get help too, that it's okay to ask for that help.
So you're not spending the money to buy a billboard, but you're working through.
We do buy some billboards too.
You do buy billboards. Got to keep the billboard people in business too.
This is a great.
You're doing a word of mouth within the people who are trusted within the community.
A lot on social media, and so to use the example of the billboard, we've partnered with a bunch of organizations in Trenton. I hesitate to list them because I'm going to forget one, but I'm going to try. Capitol Health, Catholic Charities, the Rescue Mission of Trenton, Homefront, Henry J. Austin Health Center on a program called For My Baby and Me. So talk about areas of stigma. The program is focused around women who are pregnant and opiate dependent. So people who are using opiates and find themselves pregnant. And so this is a difficult patient to treat for many addiction treatment places because they're concerned about the health of the baby, when in fact there's a very strong evidence-based way to do it. But these women are very hesitant to ask for help because they're concerned that they're going to lose their babies.
They're going to have their kid taken away from them, absolutely.
So it's kind of an avoidance approach until a few weeks before they deliver, when they try to quit and think they're going to be clean. And in fact, that's the worst thing you can possibly do. So this system, there's a phone number to call. And that one phone number connects them with a navigator at the Rescue Mission of Trenton, which I hope I mentioned before. They're one of the partners too, who will talk to that woman. And if she wants to come into the program, pick her up from wherever she is. If she needs a sober place to live, take her to Homefront and get her treatment, get her medication-assisted therapy that will minimize withdrawal, that will be safer for the baby, get her to prenatal care. And the outcomes from this program already are incredible. We have babies who are going home 7-10 days shorter out of the NICU, who are going home not dependent on opiates, and the moms are keeping their babies. You know, DCP&P is letting the moms keep their babies because they see that these women are getting their lives together. And the thing that's impressed me most, and your homeless tent city is making me think about it, the women in the program together have become a community who are looking out for one another, supporting one another. One of the women got married in the program and had the other participants in the program at her wedding with her. So there is the ability for women to support one another, for people to support one another in these types of communities.
Excellent segue, Greg, because in your vision of housing the homeless, it's not individual fiefdoms. It's a community.
Exactly, and Greg brought up an incredible point, because that's precisely it. It's the stigma is that these people are not capable of taking care of themselves. They are not empowered to take care of themselves, and people think about microhousing as not being adequate housing for some reason, and what people tend to focus on is the permanent housing and putting people into hotels and things of that nature. And exactly what is missing is what Greg is talking about, the idea of community, because people who are struggling in whatever form that might be, if they have community and they are able to empower one another and have opportunity to empower themselves, are a lot more capable than people actually realize.
Absolutely. And of course, when they get just sort of shoved into a hotel room or something like that, there is a community there. It exists. It swallows them up.
Exactly.
And eats them whole.
Exactly. It's a community that is not providing job skills training, for example, or support from peers.
Or any form of nurturing,
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely, of any kind. So you've taken a lot of photographs of homeless people. Mm-hmm. Are these photographs that you take, like, do people sit still while you stage the lighting and everything else, or are you just working with what's there?
I'm just working with what's there, and generally most people have been very open to having their picture taken, and they enjoy the conversation, and they want to share their stories. So I really haven't encountered too many problems.
You must have an inviting personality. Has anyone ever been hostile?
Sure, there are people who don't want to have their pictures taken,
so
absolutely,
how have they
but
reacted to you?
I don't invade their space. If somebody does not want to have, I try to be extremely considerate of that. If somebody doesn't want to be photographed or videotaped, or you just don't do it,
Right.
Sure.
Absolutely.
I think the vast majority of people, when treated with respect, give the same back. My entry into healthcare was as a paramedic, so I spent a lot of time out in communities, going into settings where people had need, or things were unsettled for whatever reason. And really, it's about showing respect for people and getting it back. And I think really it's by far, there are some exceptions, but it's really
absolutely. And people are actually very happy to have somebody approach them that wants to talk with them and engage in conversation and hear their story, because they really do want to share.
Do you ever give them stuff? Do you give them food, money?
I have occasionally given people some money. told them to go get themselves a sandwich or something. But really, no, I don't. I don't try to use tools like that to engage them. I try to really engage with them on a more personal basis.
Yeah, on a personal level. So you and two partners set about the task of convincing the legislature to do something. But there's more to this than just building a house. This goes on to the political level.
Well, sure. So what happened was, after spending so much time in Tent City, the micro-housing community issue and the tiny home show was on TV, and people were building tiny home communities in Oregon and a variety of different places. And it led to bringing a proposal to Senator Sweeney's office, and his legislative aides absolutely loved the whole concept and drafted legislation from the proposal that was brought to them. And it's been 6 years now that I've been trying to get this legislation passed. So it's currently Bill S-177 and A-3072 under sponsorship with Senator Troy Singleton on the Senate end, and Senator Stack, and Assemblywoman Annette Quijano and Assemblyman Andrew Zwicker, as well as I think maybe 7 other Assembly people who have signed on to sponsor the bill. It's waiting for Speaker of the House Crave Coughlin to bring it up for a vote in the full House Assembly. And we are waiting for Senator Sarlo in the Budget and Appropriations Committee to bring it up for a vote to get the bill out of Budget and Appropriations, where the bill has died previous times before.
All right, but it sounded like you were optimistic that this might be your year.
I'm always optimistic.
Okay.
Always have to be optimistic, Greg.
Tell me what you're asking for in the bill. What is the bill?
Well, the bill allows for 3 municipalities, or up to 6 municipalities within the state of New Jersey. We'll just talk about 3. 1 in the south, 1 in the central, 1 in the north. Municipalities to allow for the creation of building micro-housing to support the homeless situation, and they actually receive credits towards their fair share housing responsibilities if they waive the zoning and the rules and regulations regarding, most building.
So this would essentially pave the way for the construction to occur.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Correct.
I understand.
Correct.
We're going to take a short break. I want you to stay right where you are and hit that share button on Facebook, because there's a whole lot more show coming up. I'll be back in 1 minute with Gregory Paulson and Sherry Rubel. Stay right where you are. I was saying, unfortunately, the rescue mission is not so on board with this project.
No, they're not.
And we are back. Before we go further, I do need to thank all the people who made donations to Age Out Angels this week. We thank you so very much for your generosity. If you have an employee giving fund or matching gifts foundation associated with your place of work, we would certainly appreciate your contacting us and telling us how we can participate in that. Private message me on Facebook or email to greg@ageoutangels.org. And I want to remind everyone that you can donate to Age Out Angels every time you make a purchase from Amazon. All you have to do is designate Age Out Angels to be your Amazon Smile designee, and a portion of your payment will go to Age Out Angels without it costing you 1 penny more for the things you're going to buy. I can make it easy for you to designate Age Out Angels as your Amazon Smile recipient. All you have to do is contact me either via Facebook or greg@ageoutangels.org. And I can send you a link that will take you directly to our designation. Back now with Gregory Paulson and Sherry Rubel. So, Greg, your organization created this community health needs and asset assessment, and it's not the first time.
Not the first time
This
we've
has
done
been
it.
done before. It's a mouthful. It's 136 pages, so it's an eyeful, and with a title like the Community Health Needs and Asset Assessment.
It's a very healthcare kind of title.
It's a mouthful. But tell me, what
Sure.
the purpose is and what we're accomplishing here with this.
So this is the third one we've done. All nonprofit hospitals are required by the government to do every 3 years a health needs assessment of the communities they serve for the purpose of guiding their programmatic decisions over the next 3 years. So the first one we did was 2013. That one was unique because, there are multiple hospitals in Trenton, but each had done their own assessment before. So along the theme of kind of aligning efforts and reducing duplication, we all came together and did one assessment for the community. We repeated that in 2016 and this again in 2019. It's available on our website at trentonhealthteam.org. You just click on the resources section and you'll find it. We try to make sure that we're accurately capturing both the conditions of the community, both positive and negative. Traditionally, it's a needs assessment, but we've learned that we can't just talk about the needs of the community without also highlighting all the assets the community has with which they can address those needs. So we do that by looking at a lot of healthcare data, which certainly healthcare has a lot of, but also spending a lot of time out in the community with organizations and residents directly, making sure we understand with a fair bit of nuance what it's like to live in the Trenton community and experience health.
All right, so we'll talk about that in like maybe two different cubby holes here.
Sure.
So what did you determine are the community health needs? What are the needs of this urban environment?
Well, there are several. We categorize them. So there's needs around chronic conditions. There's needs around social barriers to health, things like transportation, access to healthy food, safe housing. I know we're going to talk a little bit about, kind of the impact of the toxic stress in the community, particularly in childhood and adverse childhood experiences. And then we have some additional focus areas on other things that are really challenging for the community.
Excellent. Sherry, in the homeless community, do you find like a ridiculously high level of stress among the people? Is it a ridiculously high stressful way for people to live, or is it normal? Is it just Tuesday?
Oh, well, I don't believe you can truly even begin to address health if you're speaking about somebody who's living on the streets or doesn't have a roof over their head.
So there's nothing even there to evaluate.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's important to distinguish between stress that we all refer to that is somewhat episodic, right? You go to work, you have a stressful day. You have an exam coming up in school, you feel stressed. And a chronic stress where your body physiologically responds to stress, right? You have a hormone response, but when your body is constantly under a stress condition, when you're always in that fight or flight kind of mechanism, it actually changes the physiology of your body and your brain, and those changes can be permanent. So when a child is dealing with something like being separated from caregivers, like not having housing, like abuse that's of several kind or neglect, that actually changes the chemistry and the structure of their brain that has a significant impact on their health and well-being across the rest of their life course.
It's a physical
change
that occurs. It's an actual physical change that occurs.
So
and
the
once that physical change occurs, it's not exactly reversible, is it?
It's mitigatable. So it's not like there's nothing that can be done. But what I think is interesting, the original work here was done with the CDC and Kaiser Permanente out in California. It was 17,000 participants in this study. So the ACE study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, is a 10-question study that Kaiser administered to its members at the time and tried to see how many of these conditions did people have. And it asks about abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. The things are physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical or emotional neglect, and then mental illness, violence toward parents, divorce, whether a relative's incarcerated, or whether there's substance abuse. And those 10 measures have a strong predictor for the incidence of health and social problems later in life. Things like drug use, alcoholism, obesity, chronic disease, depression, suicide attempt, STDs. There's a ton that it's related to.
Yeah,
and homelessness.
Absolutely.
And life expectancy, right? I mean, there's a causal link there between. And so if you're out there listening and you're not familiar with this term, adverse childhood experience, this is one you need to know because it's one you're going to hear a lot about in the future. And if you've never done this, just when you get a chance, Google Adverse Childhood Experience Test, or ACEs. It's ACE and then a small s, ACEs test, and take the test. It's a 10-question test, and if your number, I believe, is 4.
4 or more. Well, so any score is somewhat predictive. So the statistics are children who have 2 or more ACEs, 33% of them end up getting a chronic disease, compared to 14% of children with no ACEs. And that's also, there's an inequity across races. So black non-Hispanic children with 1 or more ACEs, 61% of them, followed by Hispanic children, 51% have 1 or more ACEs, white non-Hispanic children, 40%, and Asian non-Hispanic children, 23%. There's a tremendous predictor of geography. Certainly lower socioeconomic conditions result in more ACEs for the population as well.
Yeah, my friend Shakira, who works for Department of Human Services, just makes a blanket statement, and she says the whole city is traumatized.
There's a quote from Dr. Moret, who's the previous head of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, that your health is more determined by your zip code than your genetic code.
Wow.
Where you live is a much stronger predictor of what your health outcomes will be than the biology that you were born with. There's a Robert Wood Johnson also did a life expectancy survey across the country where they calculated average life expectancy based on where you were born. A child born in Trenton has a 14-year shorter life expectancy than a child born 15 minutes up Route 1 in Princeton Junction.
In Princeton, yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Sherry, so tell me, in addition to the legislative push that you're making right now to get, just to pave the way to build the microhome communities, is there anything else that you're working on now? I know that you had a high school who built a home, right?
Yes, there was Gateway Regional High School students actually became involved through an architect that I was working with, and they are now building. I believe they're going to carry it through for the school year and have that as a part of their construction. I don't know exactly what curriculum,
yeah.
yes, to build tiny homes. And there were also some high school students apparently working with another nonprofit here in Trenton who are actually building a tiny home as well on somebody's property here in Lawrenceville. So ISLES has been actually extremely supportive of this concept. Mr. Hart has come on board. Peter Rose, was somebody at ISLES who I initially spoke with quite intensively about this project and has been a great supporter. A Better Way, Perry Shaw, and A Better Way with the Reentry Task Force. And more recently, I have a high school student who is working on her capstone project and working on a paper about developing tiny home communities. And so we're hoping that when she finishes this capstone project, that we'll be able to have a fairly thorough proposal to be able to share with municipalities and whatnot,
yeah.
so that
So-
hopefully we can get some people on board.
So people may be out there listening right now and thinking one of two things. Either A, I'd love to get behind this project because it's an amazing project. Or B, maybe I could do something like this in my area because you're not franchising it or anything, right?
Absolutely not,
I mean,
no.
you're just hoping that it will catch
Yeah.
on and people everywhere will do this sort of thing.
Right.
So is there a way that they can learn more about it, get in touch with you? Is there a website of any kind?
Sure. Well, people can go to my Revival Village Facebook page, and on that page is the website link. It's like it's a free website, so it's like a Wix. It's a strange kind of an address, so it's hard to give out.
Right.
Just
go to Facebook.
But they could go to Facebook and check out Revival Village, and people can email me at revivalvillage@gmail.com if they're looking for some more information.
Fantastic. And now, Greg, as a result of this report, is there something we should be doing?
Well, it's a fairly broad question. This report is used pretty heavily by the healthcare entities in Trenton and a lot of our partner community organizations to kind of guide their work and make sure, as they're applying for grant dollars, as they're structuring programs, that those are as tailored as possible to the needs of the community. So that's really the piece. I think, individuals trying to get involved. There are a lot of organizations who would benefit from additional help, certainly from donations, but also just awareness. If people are really wanting to know a little bit more nuance about what these needs are, as we've been talking about with the homeless, I think just getting educated, learning a little bit more, trying to understand a little bit more of a perspective on an issue, whatever that particular issue is, I think really helps. And that's something we tried to do. One of the reasons it's 136 pages is, we needed to talk a little bit more about not just why is the diabetes a need, why is food access a need. Well, let's talk more about it. Why does it happen? Why is it hard for someone to get to the doctor's office? What if the mom has 3 kids, and what if the only transportation that she has to get there will only let her take one child at a time? Or there's a lot of nuance that goes into this that people living in a community know inherently, but that others may not assume with kind of their first pass at an issue.
Yeah, you've clearly drawn a link in this document between housing and health.
Oh, clearly. Some of our first work was around helping those who were frequently in the ER, and so we had one of our first care management clients, we always called her Lady B, had more than 350 ER visits in a year. So she was in the ER more often than not. And one of the first things she needed was a place to stay. Now, she also had behavioral health and substance use needs that needed supportive housing and needed services to go with it. But you need a place to live. You need a place to be. Absolutely.
And Sherry is trying to provide those places. It's really wonderful. How many years have you been at this now, Sherry?
6, 7 years.
6, 7 years. Yeah, this is not something that happens overnight.
No,
you're finally getting it to a point where it might be legislatively viable for people to do that.
We'll see.
So, all right. So, but when that happens now, and a municipality clears out makes the land and everything available, it requires a developer, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And, I've spoken to people who are interested. I do need an engineer. So if there's any engineers out there who would like to donate some time and energy to a project like that, we're looking for an engineer and a site planner. Mm-hmm.
Great. Have you tried volunteermatch.com?
No, I can't.
There might be an engineer out there, who would find this to be as important as we all know that it is.
Right.
So what else do we need to know about this document? We talked a little bit about housing. We talked a little about adverse childhood experiences. But is there an overarching message? Does this document reveal that there's a whole lot of work that needs to be done, or that we're trending in the right direction?
I think it reveals that Trenton's a pretty incredible community, a community with needs and a community with a lot of assets, like incredible annual events, great transportation infrastructure, incredible social service organizations and faith organizations that work together incredibly well, and there's a lot of pride in the community. We hear constantly that people look out for one another, have been here a long time, and if you make it here, you're really strong and can really make it in life. So it's a proud community, one with a lot of assets. I'm not from Trenton originally, and I don't live there now, but I'm proud to work there and work with the people of Trenton.
And I just say I recently moved to Trenton specifically because of that.
Did you really?
Yes, I did.
Wow. That's pretty impressive.
It's an incredible community.
Yeah.
There's no community like Trenton. I've never encountered so many amazing people doing so much amazing work and things. It's truly remarkable.
I couldn't agree more.
It actually really is a wonderful community.
It really is.
And people don't seem to understand that the crime that gets publicized is a very, very minute part of actually Trenton. The police have told me, there are certain times of day where you don't want to be in certain places. And,
which is true in any community.
I get that, right. And certainly I'm careful when I'm in Trenton to never interfere with commerce.
Well, I think it's any violent crime in a community is really a tragedy, and it's really difficult for that community. The crime rates in Trenton have improved significantly over time. I think the Trenton Police Department and a lot of the social service organizations that work with them do incredible work. We do highlight community safety as a need for Trenton. Certainly there's a lot more work to do, but that's a really new, multifaceted need. We talked about, certainly the work that you focus on, the reentry system. You mentioned kind of ISLES and their Youth Institute and kind of giving youth a path to develop. We have an intern with us who just finished her time with us this summer, who was a Trenton native, who just kind of finished high school and was off in college. And it's incredible. I mean, these are incredible, ingenious kids doing a lot of stuff who just exposed to more opportunity, connected better with us, have just untapped potential. So that's part of a safety and violence issue as well, really connecting the youth of the community, giving them opportunities and letting them give back to and kind of nurture their community as they grow up.
So what's next for the Trenton Health team?
We're proud to be part of a lot of initiatives nationally that are looking at this. As we talk about trying to reduce the cost of the U.S. healthcare system, certainly a political topic right now, it's really about our society being healthier. This isn't about making the specific going to the doctor or getting surgery less expensive. We could do that a little bit. But ultimately, our society needs to become a healthier society. We need to drink less sugar-sweetened beverage. We need to look at what we eat. We need to have some physical activity. We need to come together as a community. We live in the Garden State. There's incredible farmers markets
and they're
all
not
over the place.
available to the people in the inner city.
But they are even more.
Market. Yeah.
They are even more, and there are ways that we're working to get that produce packaged and into residents' homes, by delivery mechanisms. So there's a lot to do, but this is what we're talking about. How do we as a society become healthier?
And knowing how to use those products. I
Absolutely.
I have a feeling that if you don't see a vegetable long enough, and then you encounter one, you really don't have any idea how to make it tasty.
And do you have the time and resources to cook?
Yeah.
Versus, picking up fast food is certainly easy. And if you're working 2 or 3 jobs and by yourself taking care of multiple dependents, you don't have a lot of options. So we need to really balance health, practicality, cost, and just make this achievable for community members.
Currently, I'm working in Sprout U of the Arts. It's a school here in Trenton, and it serves maybe 75 students, and they take from infant on through high school. It's a private nonprofit art school, and they really utilize the arts as a vehicle to provide health and well-being for the students of Trenton. It's truly remarkable, the opportunities and the things that are happening in Sprout U of the Arts.
Fantastic.
The arts community is really probably one of the biggest assets of the Trenton community. It's tremendous. Right. It's growing. It's really incredible.
Yeah. Have you been going to First Friday?
Well, I've been going to the Trenton Circus Squad and to Artworks and the Passage Theater and things of that nature.
Excellent.
Who are all working
Absolutely.
with the school.
We're going to take one more little short break. Don't go away. There's still time to hit that share button. And when we come back, I'm going to finish the story I started in the beginning of the show. Tell you about something really unique. Don't go away. And we are back. So here's the deal. Nonprofits are starting to realize, I think, the value of combining forces. We are basically stronger together. Many of us are small. There are a lot of small nonprofits, and alone, as standalones, they just don't carry that much clout. But together as a group, they can be a good angry mob. Now, what the groups always need is some kind of a leader. And it's always nice when the group who wants to step up and be the leader is actually already a big group that has a big reputation and is well known within their community. So in the last 2 weeks, I've seen evidence of 2 organizations who are focusing on mentoring. And I've never seen this before. I've never seen a mentoring convention before. But evidence is starting to show that children who have a mentor in their life, someone to guide them, tend to have better outcomes than ones who don't. So the significance of mentoring is beginning to become recognized, and there are 2 groups who are focusing on mentoring and want to combine the forces of a lot of nonprofit mentoring organizations to serve the population that needs it. Now, the first one, and this is so cool, is the Trenton Public Schools. The whole school district is organizing a mentoring day. And that's such a wonderful example of how the school and the community can work together. That's actually something about like what community schooling looks like. It's where the school reaches out and draws the community into the school area to serve specific students in very specific situations. And so the whole point here is to let the consumers know who's doing the mentoring, who the service providers are, and to do it in a nice, easy, all-in-one place, serve them a nice little lunch, and let them walk away knowing that there's help for their children. The second one is the Shiloh Community Development Corporation. Now, that's an organization that is much smaller, clearly, than the school system, right? But extremely well-known and well-positioned and well-trusted in the community. And they have enough self-actualization to know that no matter how big they become, the demand for quality mentors will always be bigger. That demand is always so great that the only way to serve the maximum amount of youth is to combine forces with other mentoring programs. I'd love to hear your opinion about it. You can write on my Facebook page even after the show. You can certainly email to me at greg@ageoutangels.org. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Another hour talking about the youth who should matter more in our political and economic discourse than they do. And we thank you for tuning in and maybe helping us spread the word. Again, we offer humble thanks to Hamilton Radio, to my most excellent guests, Gregory Paulson and Sherry Rubel. Let's make a date to meet right back here live next week, August 19th. I'll have a studio full of people waiting to speak to you. Michelle Tompkins, along with the next generation youth leaders. Ariel Payne, a former foster kid, is going to be on. And Kevin B. Tylis. Please put that on your calendars right now so you won't forget. Thanks to our engineer, Ruben. Music provided by Angel Fire. Our webmaster is Carmen Garcia Valera. And our social media specialist is Bailey Braverman. Until next week, let's make this week the best week ever. Have a great evening.
Shooting star.